Gavin Newsom, the California governor, is seen by many Democrats as the future of the party. And in an exclusive CNN interview, Dana Bash asks him about his presidential ambitions, Joe Biden's performance, and the historic strikes keeping the economy on edge.
I want to talk about what's going on with labor, starting with the UAW strike. It's a historic strike against the big three automakers in the U.S. We're now on day 4. Yep. Workers are demanding a 40% raise and a 4-day work week. Do you support the strike, and are those demands reasonable?
Well, I support the workers, and I support a construct that has to be resolved. I think it was Plutarch who said the imbalance between the rich and the poor is the oldest and most fatal ailment of all republics. We have to address that fundamental gap.
So yes, you support the strikers?
Absolutely, I absolutely support the workers in the strike and the strikers for fundamental reasons. It's about fairness. It wasn't that many years ago. It wasn't the black and white movie days. They took pay cuts. They took concessions as we, the American people, taxpayers, bailed out these corporations. Now they're enjoying record profits. I mean, I think the American people are overwhelmingly supportive of those workers. As it relates to the details of the negotiations, I do enough labor negotiation not to opine what's been presented in public. But obviously, all of us want to see this work through quickly.
Another strike, the Writers Guild, SAG. This has been going on for months now. Yep. In Hollywood, in your home state. Right. These are your constituents. Yeah. This is a very important industry in your state. Experts estimate that the strike already cost $5 billion.
Probably more.
From your state's economy.
Yeah.
Number one, I don't believe you've been out in the picket line, have you?
I've been deeply involved. In fact, was with talking to the WGA and members of the studios over the last week. We're going to be meeting later this week. I'm in a different position as it relates to trying to be constructive on both sides, to utilize the formal authority I have as governor, the convening capacity I have as governor, the moral authority to the extent I can bring it into the conversation to try to get everybody to the table. That's the work I do in state to address the issue of not just public sector disputes, which I deal with often, but private sector disputes. I'm encouraged by the conversations over this last weekend. I'm not going to overstate that. And I'm encouraged that they're meeting again later this week.
You support the UAW and their strike, but you don't want to go that far when it comes to the Writers Guild and Screen Actors Guild?
Well, that's the same question. Absolutely support what their concerns are, and I support WGA and SAG as it relates to their existential stress as it relates to streaming and how it's radically changing the business model as it relates to artificial intelligence. One thing I know about artificial intelligence is we don't know what we don't know. And that anxiety stacked upon all the stress and anxiety that we've all been feeling around income and wealth disparities and all the challenges post-pandemic that we've gone through makes a perfect stew of stress that's leading to a lot of the anxiety that we're experiencing all across the country, not just at SAG and WGA as it relates to that expression of the strike or UAW, but you're seeing it at Starbucks. You're seeing it more broadly as labor's exercising more muscle out of more fear and stress about the world we're living in. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think fundamentally that's a good thing. I believe in collective bargaining. I believe working families and the working poor do better when they organize together. And in California, I don't know there's a state in our nation, not a state in the nation, that does more to support that framework and those bargaining units.
As a proud Democrat, as a supporter of President Biden and his reelection, the frustration being expressed like this among people in the workforce, labor unions, is that a warning sign?
It's been a trend line for decades.
Well,
and it's
but
a
I'm talking
headline
about even
in the
just
last few weeks, and few years. I mean, this is by no means anomalous. These are well-established trend lines. This president knew that. He campaigned on this. Scranton Joe, no one with a better record on some of these issues, not rhetorical, substantive record, voting record in the Senate, a leader on these issues. He's had a great labor record. He has moral authority, not just in the position of president with his formal authority. And so none of this, I think, is surprising.
I want to talk about that as it relates to the headwinds that President Biden is facing when it comes to the perception, the gap, as you call it, between how people think the economy is doing and how people feel the economy is doing. It is true unemployment is near all-time lows.
3.7%.
And inflation is back under 4%. Interest rates are high. Gas prices are rising again.
Yep.
And the bottom line is the majority of Americans just don't feel good about the way things are. Is this just a messaging problem, or is there more fundamental
No, I think
problems than that?
Look, we've dealt with, we've been polarized and traumatized for the last 5 or 6 years. I don't think any of us have given us, time to take a deep breath and reflect on it. What we're experiencing is not unique in the United States at all. I mean, it's a global phenomenon. The issues of COVID and the stress it created, the supply chain impacts, what happened with the invasion in Ukraine, the impacts with OPEC Plus in particular, another reason we need to get off the dependency of fossil fuels. All of those things stack up at this moment. But directionally, this president is performing. I mean, we're seeing inflation down roughly 2/3, just shy of 2/3 since its peak. That's a directionally very positive sign. The lowest unemployment for blacks, Hispanics, and disabled, 70-year lows for women in this country. I mean, with all due respect, the Republican Party, they can point the finger and say it could have been better, it could be better. They offer nothing in terms of alternative strategies to make it so.
But Joe Biden is the president.
Yeah.
And so the expectation and the sort of referendum is on the incumbent.
Yeah.
Is there a danger in telling people what the stats are and making them feel like they shouldn't feel as bad as they do?
No, I think you have to. I mean, you got to feel people's pain. You've got to acknowledge that. That's why I began talking about how traumatized and polarized we've been. I've been talking about that stacking of stress, and I've been talking about the distress people are feeling, and that sense of dislocation, disequilibrium, this notion that we are, we're more disconnected in our politics. You see it on the nightly news. That stress and frustration that we haven't come to grips with. All of that's real, and I think that is making it more challenging.
You promised if Dianne Feinstein steps down before the end of her term to appoint a woman of color as an interim.
Yes.
I'm sure you saw that Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who's running in the primary, did not like that very much. She said the idea that a black woman should be appointed only as a caretaker to simply check a box is insulting to countless black women across the country. And then she went on to say that the perspective of a black woman in the U.S. Senate is sorely needed and needed for more than a few months.
Yeah, I appreciate that point of view. We have a primary in a couple of months. This is a hypothetical on top of a hypothetical, and what I said stands. If under that hypothetical situation, I'm asked to make an appointment, I will make an appointment of an African-American woman, period, full stop. And why? Because I think best person should be there, and I happen to think that representation matters. That's why I made 2 out of 3 Supreme Court justice positions of African-American women, and appointed them, and appointed a remarkable woman as our Secretary of State, an African-American woman, the first head of our law enforcement agency, CHP, an African-American woman, and the head of the California Air Resources Board, African-American woman. So I've got a pretty good record in this space, and I'm going to hold myself to account if that hypothetical on top of a hypothetical ever occurs.
Okay, before I let you go, I know you've said many, many times you do not see a world in which you will run for president in 2024.
Yes. I mean, yes, no.
Yes, you have not, yes.
The answer is no.
No,
yes,
you will not run in
heard that.
2024.
Yeah, no ambiguity.
Generally speaking, do you think you would make a good president?
Oh, come on. No, that's now a triple hypothetical if we've just doubled. And
So you never thought about it?
No, I'm not that guy. I'm just not. I never had a photo.
You never looked in the mirror and said,
I'm
could
not
I be
a member
president?
of the Senate. No. Yeah. I haven't.
No, but you're a chief executive of a big
Yeah,
state.
no,
It's not that
yeah,
big of a
and,
leap.
I
We have seen governors of California become president before.
Yeah, and others that have tried. Look, I'm blessed and humbled beyond words. They tried to recall me a couple years ago. So humility and grace is front and center in my consciousness. And what's also front and center is just getting out of this sort of navel gazing around Joe Biden. Let's get going. Let's get on the train. This train has left the proverbial station. We have got to get on and stop, move on and get this campaign going. And I'm excited about it. I'm going to do my small part. And whatever they ask me to do, I'll do, and stand up and stand proud and strong, because I just never had the opportunity to defend a record, I think, as impressive as the record of the Biden administration in the last 2 years, with humility and recognition that not every problem in the world has been solved, and that people still have deep unease and anxiety about the world they are living in. And that is part of our responsibility every single day to make those lives better. And that's what I look forward to the next year and a half of the current administration, and then 4 years of an extended term of the Biden-Harris administration.
Governor, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.